Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Public Leadership Institute's online training series. This particular session is really about how to hold a great press event as a tool of helping advance an agenda, whether that's from as an elected leader introducing policy and legislation and trying to advance it, or advocate in grassroots organizations trying to help support or push back against other policies. I think you're going to come away with some concrete skills from some of the best folks in the business. A little housekeeping. My name is Dave Woodward. I'm the National Network Director for our Public Leadership Institute, also a county commissioner and a former state legislator. I'm going to be your host today, but just a little bit of background for we have a few new people who are joining us. I want to give a little more background on the Public Leadership Institute. PLI is a nonprofit, nonpartisan policy and leadership center. Think about it in some ways a progressive political think tank, as well as a leadership development center focused on bringing public attention to key issues of equity and justice and working with public leaders to improve the economic and social conditions for all people. You can get a lot of information about all the work that we do at www.publicleadershipinstitute.org. There you'll actually find a host of publications, many that are on the screen now. We have digital versions of all of those at our website. You feel free to come in, whether it's the Progressive Agenda, a Playbook for Abortion Rights, Voicing Our Values, which is a message training guide. You can get a digital copy of all of these at our website, or in some cases you can purchase books, the actual books, through Amazon, particularly Voicing Our Values at Amazon.com. A little bit of housekeeping. We really want this, particularly this session, to be more conversation and providing the answers and insight to the questions that all of you have. To that end, we've got a number of ways that you can participate in today's conversation, regardless of where you're joining us around the country. You should see on your control panel a hand icon at any time. Just click on that. I will unmute you on my end, and you'll be able to ask our panelists questions as when we pause for the question-answer portions of today's session. Also realize that people join us from a variety of things. If people don't know, you can join this session and our webinars through your smartphones, tablets, laptops, desktop computers, etc. Sometimes people join us and they're not in a place where they actually have audio on their end, and so it's sometimes easier to type questions in the question bar. As those questions come in, I will field them to our speaker. You also can get my email, dwoodward@publicleadershipinstitute.org. If there's any questions that you have about anything shared about today, we'll be sure to get it to the presenters or get you an answer as quickly as possible. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Hugh Madden, a good friend, but also the communications director at Progress Michigan. Prior to his role here, he did government affairs work with SEAU Healthcare in Michigan, has been in the political space for quite some time, and has, without question, been an tireless progressive advocate, working with elected officials as well as organizations to get their message out there, and doing so very successfully. So Hugh, thank you very much for being with us today.
No problem. Thanks so much, Dave. And also I should add that we are also joined by Sam Inglot, who is the Deputy Communications Director here at Progress Michigan, who works real closely with the media and with partners to put on successful media events as well. And so he's going to join us and share some of his best practices. Sam's also a trained journalist, and so he's been on both sides of press events, and so he also brings that insight to the work we do here in Michigan.
Great. Well, wonderful. Sam, thanks for being with us. I didn't know. Sorry I did not give you your own slide. Next time I will, I promise.
I won't hold it against you, Dave.
All right, you should have control there, and I can see your screen, and so you can start your slideshow and go from there.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. As Dave mentioned, my name is Hugh Madden. I'm the Communications Director with Progress Michigan. I'm joined today by Sam Inglot, our Deputy Communications Director. Progress Michigan is a 501c4 nonprofit, nonpartisan communications hub. We focus on progressive communications and accountability work here in the state of Michigan. We're also part of the ProgressNow network, which is a network of 21 states doing this type of work all across the country. We're actually really grateful for this opportunity to share some of the tools and tips for success that not only that we do here in Michigan, but that we've learned from partners. So we'll go into to some of the goals. We have 90 minutes, a lot to cover, and we did leave time for questions. And we basically split this up into 3 different categories. And after each category, we think we've got time for questions at that time. So just want to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to participate if you have questions. So our goals today will be a how-to guide for organizing and executing a local press event, understanding the basics of media relations, and then, which is vitally important, is tips on how to keep your issue at the forefront of the political conversation, which, you know, in the era of having a president of the United States who tweets and kind of sucks all the oxygen out of the media space, that's more important now than ever. So we'll go ahead and start with the how-to guide, and I'm going to turn things over to Sam.
Thanks, Hugh, and thank you, Dave, for having us on, and thank you to everyone that decided to hop on today. Again, my name is Sam Inglot. I'm the Deputy Communications Director at Progress Michigan. I'm responsible for creating a lot of our press content, organizing and executing earned media events for Progress Michigan and our partners, and for maintaining relations with the press. I graduated from Michigan State with a bachelor's in journalism focused in public policy, and I was a reporter in Lansing, Michigan's capital, for a number of years before I joined the Progress Michigan team. And I guess first off, I just want to say, you know, so why is it important for us to have a relation with the press, and why is it important for us to have strategies and tactics for getting our message out into the media? And I guess number one, the media is really kind of a gateway to the public. People are consumers of the information that is put out by the media, so having good relationships with the press and understanding how to leverage those opportunities is important for getting our issue and out into the public and driving folks to take action. So this is, for the first portion of this, I'm just going to basically be covering some of the best practices that go into organizing a press conference, and this is kind of a crunched down version of a longer training that we do on this, but basically I'm just going to walk through the steps of how to organize and execute a earned media event or press conference. So the first thing that you're going to want to do, obviously, is identify what your issue is, and this can really depend on your organization, your campaign, your candidate, and your community. And really, it's important to think about organizing press conferences in kind of 2 ways. You've got your rapid response, which is a lot of what at Progress Michigan we really pride ourselves on, which is when an elected official does something or says something that we don't think holds to progressive values, or we think might end up hurting people in our community, we want to rapidly respond, hence the term rapid response, to that, so we can quickly interject ourselves within the story, within the conversation around what was said or done by this elected official or organization. And then you've got more of your long-term kind of advocacy type of a press conference. Let's say that there's a bill moving through your community or a bill moving through the legislature that you want to draw attention to, or there is a long-standing issue in the community that hasn't gotten the attention that it deserves. So basically you have rapid response and then you have advocacy. One is very quick. You want to try to organize things as fast as you can, whereas on the advocacy side you have a little bit more time to organize things and get things set up. So first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to define your message. What message do you want to get out into the public? And a good message does two things. It captures and keeps people's attention, and it leads to a desired action. You don't just want to go and put out a message that says, this is terrible, this is wrong, and that's it. What you want to say is, this is terrible, this is wrong, here's what you can do about it. It doesn't have to be this way. This is the action that we want you to take. You know, here's a problem in our community, here's our solution. Here's what we think elected officials and people in power should do. So you always just want to make sure that a message has those two components. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to break it out into talking points. And I know that the phrase talking points sometimes I think kind of conjures up bad images in people's heads of scripted elected officials, people regurgitating kind of lifeless talking points. But really what talking points are is kind of like your best points for your message. And really what talking points help you do is break out complex or nuanced policy and really have it in a digestible format so you as a speaker can accurately reflect the message that you're trying to get across. And it's a really good way actually of practicing your message. I always say that just like with if you were doing woodworking or ice skating or parasailing, you know, everything takes practice, and that includes talking to the media and having a good media strategy. And talking points, breaking out your message into short, concise statements is just a good way to make sure that you're hitting on all the points that you need to within your campaign or around your issue. Just kind of bumping down the next bullet here, obviously, again, that second part of the message always has to be some sort of desired action. We don't just want to, you know, go screaming into the ether about how good or bad something is without telling people what they can do about it or what we plan to do about it. And in your message, it's always important to utilize values and stories over facts and figures. Like Hugh said, there's a lot of white noise going on in people's lives, from the 24-hour news cycle to Facebook and Twitter to paying the bills, feeding the kids, tying your shoes, and driving to work. We're always competing for people's attention. And the average American spends about 5 minutes a week thinking about all matters of public policy. So the window of opportunity that we have to reach people is actually pretty short. And utilizing values and stories hit at people's, the emotional decision-making parts of people's brains. As much as we like to think that we're all rational human beings who make decisions based on weighing facts and figures and choosing the best decision to meet an outcome, that's just not how we work. We human beings make an emotional, feelings-based decision, and we find the facts, figures, and statistics to back it up. So we always want to base our message around values that unite us as progressives, like opportunity for everyone, equality, and real democracy. My colleague Denzel with Progress Michigan said that facts and figures are kind of like the salt and pepper on a good meal. You know, you got the good food there in front of you. It by itself is something good that you want to eat, but you can just add a little bit of salt and pepper to it just to spice it up, make it that much better. So that's kind of how you want to think about facts, figures, and statistics. We always want to approach messaging, though, from a values-based standpoint. And with our message, again, we always want to be showing people that despite any kind of, doom and gloom type message that we might be putting out there, maybe an elected official did something bad, or there's a bill moving through the legislature that, would harm our communities. We can put out that negative messaging, but we always need to reinforce an empowering message that while things might be bad right now or things look rough right now, it doesn't have to be this way. And I think that type of message is extremely important, especially in very drawn-out campaigns. Like, think about the Flint water crisis. Folks there were constantly hearing messages of this is just the way it is, accept your lot in life. nothing would get done. But they are taking action, saying it doesn't have to be this way. We're going to change. We're going to fight things. So we want to make sure that that's included in our message as well. So how do you start to develop that message, right? Obviously, you're going to want to talk to community stakeholders. You're going to want to talk to the people that are affected by it. You're going to want to get their stories and have that be a basis of your message. But then there's also this handy tool called the message box, and it's a really good way to start to break down a campaign or an issue and start to develop that message and those talking points in that values frame. The message box is basically broken out into 4 quadrants. You've got the us on us, them on them, us on them, and them on us. And just for an example, let's talk about earned paid sick time. If that were a campaign that we're going to be starting, it's something that we've been discussing a lot here in Michigan. But so if we were the earned paid sick time campaign, fighting for everybody to have the opportunity to take off of work, we would start in the top left corner and we would say, what does the earned paid sick time campaign, what do we say about ourselves? Why are we doing this? So in that box, we would put, we're doing this because everybody deserves the opportunity to take time to get well or care for their families. No one should have to choose between a job and their health. And then you have the them on them box on the right, top right, and that might be from an organization, such, a restaurant group, lobbying group, a corporate lobbying group, and they would say, we are the job creators, we are the economic engines of the state. Nothing beats the dollar. Business is what drives our state forward. You'd want to break out the type of messaging that they would use to hype themselves. And then in that bottom left corner would be us talking about the opposition. So we would say in that situation with an earned paid sick time campaign, these are greedy corporate lobbyists that are just concerned about their bottom line and not concerned about their employees' health or their family situation. And then the them on us, that would be what is the opposition message that they're going to say about us. And obviously with any type of economic issue, pocketbook issue like earned paid sick time, they would say prices are gonna go up if this happens, people are gonna get laid off, the sky will fall. Those types of things that we typically hear from the corporate lobbying side anytime we're talking about pocketbook issues that can affect families. So the message box is just a good way to start breaking out that message and thinking about the various talking points that you're going to want to have on your campaign.
Great. Thanks, Sam. So now that you have your message and you're doing an event, the logistics of the event, a lot of the front end work, just like everything in life, is vitally important. And so we basically, there's 3 basic pieces for doing an event that you'll want to keep in mind. You'll need speakers to speak at this event, and as Sam said, personal stories go a long way. So to use the example of earned paid sick time, instead of having, say it was legislation was introduced, which just happened here in Michigan. Yes, we had the author of the bill speak on the benefits, but then obviously following up with real personal stories that people that would be positively impacted by the bill or people that have sadly been negatively impacted by the lack of the policy. And in that case, you want to emphasize diversity, gender, racial, geographic, if it's a statewide issue, make sure that you're hitting, at least all of your media markets, especially if you're doing just one event in your capital city, and then bring in organizations and people who have been there. The one thing I'll also add with speakers is prep is vital. Give them their talking points, have them practice, do one-on-one time, especially if it's someone who's never talked before. And one thing that I'll try to stress throughout this, and we always stress to anyone who is speaking, is confidence is key. The idea that you belong there and your story matters is vital to telling a good story to the media. If your speakers feel like they belong and are an authority, it's going to come across as that. And and who better to be an authority on a lot of progressive issues than the people who are impacted by those issues. And I would once again stress, if we as progressives are talking about our issues, the other side will talk about them, and they will become the experts on our own issues. Date and time is vital. So a few things that we look at whenever we're doing press events is we think about the obviously the date. Monday through Friday works best. If we're doing something with our Capitol Press Corps, they like to work the same hours as the elected officials are working. The time frame also boils down to when is the legislature in session, because with a dwindling press corps, it used to be that every major publication had two people, an inside and an outside reporter, one reporter inside the Capitol and the other one who was going around and hitting all the events and all the press conferences that were happening. With a dwindling press corps, and we'll get into media relations, just try to understand, and some of this is trial and error, when are the best times, the best dates to hold those. Decide on the location, decide on the type of conference or press conference. You can do a stand-up press conference, which is, old school. You've got a podium, you've got a microphone, nice sign, stand up, and then a lot of times we have found that, excuse me, that teleconferences, something just like this, actually works out if the issue is kind of cut and dry. So you can have media call in from all around the state, all around the country, and just have your speakers. It makes your logistics a little easier. Having said that, with location, control your space. And I'll give an example of this, and in the interest of time, I won't show you the video. But I don't know if anyone has ever seen a YouTube video of, and his name escapes me, there's a gentleman running for the mayor of Toledo, Ohio. And he was running against a fire commissioner and decided that a really great press conference would be to find a fire hydrant that wasn't working, because it was a big issue in their town. And he found one, got lots of press there, did all the work, had some really great speakers that were affected by this issue, had supporters there, he had his talking points ready to go, and they forgot to ask permission of the guy who owned the home in front of the fire hydrant. And so right in the middle of it, the guy started booing and yelling out bad things about the campaign. And so so when you're doing a stand-up press conference and you're in the physical location, make sure that you have control over the entire space as best as you can, obviously. So if you're doing it in front of someone's home, knock on their door a couple of days before, get their permission, find out, who they are, if this seems like someone that's going to be cool with it. If you're going to use, say, a public space, find out what the rules are for having a podium and having the media in front of there, especially if it's like our state capitol in Michigan. There are certain spaces at the Capitol that people will rent, and if you have your press conference there and someone else has rented the space, you're going to be scrambling. And the same goes for teleconferences. When we do those, we have a service that allows us to see who is calling in, which and also allows us to record those press conferences, which is really good, because we can see exactly which media members called in. We can record the entire event, and then we can do follow-up with that media. So those are some of the basic logistics of it. We'll kind of move on into all of the.
I just want to add a couple of things real quick. I want to jump back to bring other organizations and people who have been there. So whenever you are deciding to take up an issue, a campaign, or draw attention to a specific event, odds are there are people that have already been there and have been doing that work. And it's important for us as activists, advocates, and campaign folks to not step on other people's toes. There are folks in communities that have been working on the issues that we care about for a number of years and have insight into those issues, and it's always important for us to reach out and get their expertise. As straight cisgender white men, Hugh and I are not the folks who need to be leading the charge on immigration reform or women's health or racial equity issues. There are women and people of color-led organizations that have been in the communities doing that work for a long time, and it's up to us as allies and advocates to figure out how we can work next to them and support them rather than working above them and trying to drag them along with us. So that's just something that's just good organizing, that's good relationship building, and you always just want to be cognizant of who may be working on your issues. And then to jump down again to the controlling your space, one of the things that you always want to be cognizant of is private versus public property. If there's an employer that is doing something that you want to call out, doing a press conference from the public sidewalk in front of their building is fine, but the moment you step onto their parking lot and it's private property, you could be charged with trespassing. So you just want to make sure that the space logistics for that are all ironed out, that you're where you're allowed to be, and you're not going to get in trouble for being somewhere you're not supposed to be. And that leads us into press materials. I already talked a little bit about talking points. Basically, I always write talking points for speakers as if it were a script, but it doesn't need to be used as a script. It's one of those, it's kind of a messaging box that you want to work out of, so everybody has their talking points. You know which folks are going to be hitting which angles of your story or your issue, and all your bases are going to be covered. You want all the talking points to feed into your overall message, and again, things being based in stories and values is much more powerful than simply spouting off the nuances of policy or citing facts, figures, and statistics. So let's say on the back end, you've got your talking points, you've got your message, you've got your speakers, your date, your time, location, all that kind of stuff. You know when and where you want to do this, and you're ready to start reaching out to the press. The next thing you want to do is craft a media advisory. And what a media advisory is basically an RSVP to the media. And if you Google media advisory, you can get dozens of different layouts. The formatting is kind of inconsequential. What matters is the content. You're going to want to basically have the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, and why on your event. You're going to want to have those laid out clearly for the media to be able to see, because as a former reporter, I can tell you they get dozens of press releases every day, some of them for very out there, national things. I think I got one time a media advisory about bedtime math quiz month or something like that. So you're going to want to have this information readily available, clearly discernible, where it's happening, who's going to be speaking, when it is, and that type of information. And then you're also going to want to have prominently displayed your contact information. You should have a point of contact for the press, somebody that they can call and say, hey, when is this happening again? Or can I get an advance interview? Or, hey, I'm lost, where are you guys? And you're going to want to have that displayed on the media advisory. And with a media advisory, that's going to go out days prior to the event. Our rule of thumb is if we've got a press event that's happening at noon on Tuesday, we send out a media advisory at 5 p.m. on Monday, and then we send it out again Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. prior to the press conference. The media is oftentimes very focused on what's 6 inches in front of their face. They're focusing on what is happening that day, and so it's important to let the crew, the editor the day before know what's going on, as well as the folks the morning of. So you're going to want to send out that media advisory, like I said, at minimum the day of your event, hours prior. But like I said, we like to go with a 1-2 punch the day before and the morning of. And then you've got your press release, and this is something that you're going to want to craft before the press event. And the way I describe a press release is write it as if it were the story that you would want written. You're going to want to have all of those elements of the media advisory kind of extrapolated out to give more context. You're going to want quotes from the people that are involved talking about why it matters. And then this is kind of where that salt and pepper of your facts and figures can come in. If you want to cite a report or any statistics that help strengthen your argument, you're going to want to put them into the press release. And again, having that contact information in case there are any follow-up questions from reporters on there is vital. Basically, a press release, you'd want to write it in a way that a reporter could get the entire gist of your story, even if they didn't end up attending the press event. And you're going to want to bring copies of the press release to the event. along with, have all the names of the speakers on there, just in case any reporters have questions about anything like that. So next is the press outreach. So you've got all these press materials crafted. You know when your event is going to be taking place, and now it's time to let the press know. The first thing you're going to want to do is create a press list. Now, there are lots of services out there that will create press lists for you. We've had varying levels of success with this. Basically, they just pull from various databases and Google sources to create your kind of run-of-the-mill press list. But we found that sometimes those are sometimes inaccurate. They have dead emails on there, or they're missing certain reporters. And so if you really want a good quality press list, it's just going to take some virtual legwork, if you will. You're going to want to make phone calls and build relationships with the reporters and the outlets that you're going to be reaching out to. At Progress Michigan, we as a staff member spend a good chunk of time literally calling every press outlet in the state, asking them, if I were to have a press event, who would I want to be sending a media advisor to? Who would I want to be sending a press release to? Who would be my point of contact? And we built a database out of that. So, in today's world of Googling information, where we think we have all this information at our fingertips, I'm going to tell you right now, if you Google for press contact information, you might get it. You might find a page that has an email where you're supposed to send press releases to, but there's a chance that nobody ever checks that, and you're sending your press releases into a black hole. So it's much better to call the media outlet, find out who's covering your beat, which reporter would be best to talk to, get their name, get their phone number, and get their email, and put that into a database. And then what you're going to want to do is create a press account. You're going to want to have a dedicated email address and a select few people that have access to it who can monitor it, and that's the email address that you're going to want to put as a contact on your press materials, and it's what you're going to want to send out things like your media advisory and your press release from. And I always tell people to actually create an account. Like for example, ours, you can get a free email from anywhere, right? So you could do a progressmichigan@gmail.com or press.progressmichigan@gmail.com and have that be your dedicated email, because having a dedicated email like that also gives you another layer of legitimacy in the eyes of the press, because again, they're getting bombarded with press releases every day, and they're more likely to open an email from a more official sounding address than, Bon Jovi fan 1983@yahoo.com. I bet that press release probably will just end up in the spam folder. So once you've built your press list, you're going to want to send that media advisory, like I talked about, at least several hours prior, and that's bare minimum. I always like to go for that 1-2 day before, morning of, and then you're going to want to make pitch calls. So hopefully after you've built that press list, you've saved those phone numbers, you know the person that you're supposed to call, and you make those phone calls prior to your event, and you let them know, hey, this is going on. We sent out this media advisory. Did you get it? Did you have any questions? You want to make sure that they get it, and if they didn't, feel free to resend it. Most of the pitch calls I do, despite the fact that I know for 100% fact that we sent them a media advisory, a lot of times they just can't find it. So if you're right on the phone there with them, you can say, which email do I send it to? You send it right then, and then they can confirm with you on the spot. And when doing pitch calls, it's important to know your issue and your event inside and out, because ultimately you're going to have to sell it to the other person on the end of the phone, particularly with news stations, TV broadcasts. Early in the morning, usually around 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock-ish is when you're going to want to call them and let them know, because they go into their morning meetings around 9 and they come up with an agenda for what they're going to cover that day. And so you're going to want to sell them in an era of a lot of things to cover and dwindling newsrooms, why they should invest their resources into covering your issue. So you should know it backwards and forwards and be able to sell them on it. And then we got Showtime. So you've done all this legwork. You've crafted a good values-based message that's rooted in storytelling. You've got sound speakers from a diverse cross-section of communities to speak to the importance of this and how everyone is affected. You've got your press release, you've sent out your media advisory, you've made your pitch calls. So you're going to want to be there early to make sure that everything is set up. The last thing you want to do is show up at the same time that the press is showing up. You want to have everything ready by the time that they are there. The next thing you want to do is, and you should have this probably done prior, is have a run of show. You don't want to be standing up at the podium discussing in front of the TV cameras and the reporters who's going to talk and who's going to introduce who. You're going to want to have a run of show laid out, who's going to be introducing each speaker, when you're going to open it up to Q&A, that type of thing. And you're going to want to have those press materials like your press release and any supplemental materials like studies, facts, or figures printed out and available. And you're going to want to take note of who comes. That way you can follow up and let your partners know about which media outlets showed up. You can go then and if you've got a list of the reporters or the outlets that showed up, you can then go to their websites, track those clips down, save them for your own purposes. And then you're always going to want to control the message, right? So, and this is, a lot of this is done in the prior work of crafting the message and prepping the speakers, but you do run into situations sometimes where you've got a heated issue, the community is really into it, and you might have that situation where you're going to have the random supporter that wants to pop off in front of a camera. And that's our job as advocates and activists and communications folks to really make sure that we control the message. Obviously, every person's voice matters, but when you're doing an earned media event, controlling your message is your #1 goal. And so that's why it's important to have designated spokespeople, and for any folks that are there to support the event, that they know, look, we support your voice, and we want you to be able to have your say, but we need to have message discipline here. And the last thing that you want is to have any kind of conflicting message across your event. So you're just going to want to control who's talking to the media and make sure that any folks that are there to support you understand that there should only be designated spokespeople talking to the media. And then after the event, even though you've brought physical copies of the press release and given them to the reporters that have shown up, you're going to want to send that press release out broadly, because you always have that situation where that reporter couldn't make it or they ran into another story, but they can use your press release as the basis for writing a story. And if you've written a good enough press release, they should be able to capture the essence of it without even having to be there. So that's basically the quick and dirty of how to organize a press conference. I tried to cover everything that I think that goes into creating it, but obviously every situation is different, and you just want to make sure that you're taking the time to do your due diligence, making sure that your messaging, your spokespeople are solid, that you've actually reached out to the press, that you've sold it to them, and then you have a good product at the end to show them and the public. So do we have any questions about any of the things that we just went over?
So we covered a lot of stuff really fast. And I mean, this would be an opportunity that if there's any clarifying questions, or if you want to share experiences that you had and what worked and what didn't work, and get a reaction from two folks who do this on a regular basis. This is a great time to take advantage of that. You can either type questions in the question bar, or raise your hand if you have audio capabilities. We have some questions coming through here. James is asking, like, is there a place you can go to get a checklist for this type of planning? Like this, I mean, can we operationalize it so that before we execute something like this, here's a checklist?
I have I call it the 16-point presser. It's the longer version of what I just rambled through really fast. It's a PowerPoint presentation. I can send that to you, Dave. And then you can send it around to folks, if that works.
Sure, that works. Cool. That would be great. We'll do that. We'll do that follow-up. Carol's asking a question. I think, I mean, and particularly given the challenges in just fewer and fewer reporters working beats. Carol asks, how do you maintain a relationship with the press? What are the ongoing activities that you do to maintain a relationship with the press?
Yeah, that's something that we're about to get into. We actually have a section titled "Building Relationships with Press." So
Okay.
we're about to get into that with gusto.
All right. Perfect. Okay, well, hold on that. Vanessa asked a question. Is there such thing? Is there such a thing as sending a media advisory too far in advance?
Yeah, so you don't, again, media outlets get dozens of press releases a day, and so it's one of those things where you definitely don't want to, you can send a media advisory a month ahead of your event, but that better not be the only time that you send it, because no one's going to remember it. So it's fine to send stuff out way ahead of time, especially for things like really big events. Like, for example, we just organized the Michigan Progressive Summit, a conference that had over 700 progressive activists from around the state. We were telling reporters about that weeks in advance. But then we also sent out a media advisory the day before and the morning of, and followed all of the same protocol that we just went over, even though that wasn't necessarily an earned media event. So you can start to lay the groundwork for that. And I think that's something that's probably better done, frankly, just with a personal phone call rather than a media advisory. Because if a assignment desk editor sees it's something a month out, they're just going to move on. So you can, but that should not replace the more immediate term press outreach that's necessary to make sure that you get good press turnout.
Great. We have a question from Owen that asks, what's the advice for size of a press release? And so, I think it's getting into how comprehensive, how long. It goes on, to say many outlets will essentially print the release as their story. So it's sometimes maybe tempting to put a lot more detail in there to be able to get more coverage. But then at the same time, always hearing, keep it short. So what's the right balance?
So I'll start, and then I'll let Sam jump in, because this is usually how we do this as a team here at Progress Michigan. So my background is in organizing, union organizing specifically, and doing that kind of organizing, I had to have very fast conversations with people that were on their 15-minute break, and they would give me 2 minutes of it. So the first and most important piece of a press release is get in what you really want to say. So usually what I'll do is I'll take a crack at a press release that is quick. It tells a very quick story, has very concise quotes, and then I send it to Sam, and Sam will tell you what the advice he gives is.
Yeah, so I always want to add more context to the press release, because this is your chance to put out your messaging, your narrative, 100% like you want it to be. So if you're looking, and I think the question is kind of like, we might have gotten a little too nuanced here, but one page, you can fit a lot of information with, standard 12-point font into one page. You can creep over into 2 pages, but again, reporters are busy people, and if you're having to take 2 or 3 pages to explain your issue, you might want to rewrite the press release. And that's why it's important too, rather sometimes than completely breaking down, let's say there's a study that shows the economic and societal benefits of earned paid sick time. So you've got your quotes, you've got your personal stories in there, and then you want to add in that salt and pepper with the study, right? Rather than breaking out every part of the study or sucking up 2 or 3 paragraphs describing what it does, you can just kind of paraphrase what the study says and provide a link to it, and then allow the reporters to go off and find that information themselves. So rule of thumb, I guess, would be try to keep it to 1 page. If you're creeping over into that second page, really just kind of analyze, what might just be, what can I shorten down, what can I put into more concentrated format. So I guess that would be my advice is try to stick to one page. If you're creeping over into two, 1.5, I think, is probably, I would say, your top limit, because reporters are not going to sit there and read through pages and pages of a press release, especially if they already attended the event.
Sam or Hugh, we'll jump in here. Amari poses this question: is it better to attach the press release at an attachment in an email, or just put it in an electronic format?
I would put it in the body of an email, because lots of things can go wrong with attachments. And, you know, I don't know, there's things like, there's MailChimp out there, we use something called Action Kit that doesn't even allow you to attach things. And the problem with a lot of reporters sometimes is we ran into this situation where an entire news organization called MLive, which has a bunch of newspapers around the state here, basically ended up blacklisting anything from @progressmichigan.org because of an attachment issue early on, and it ended up running through the whole system, and none of the MLive reporters were getting our stuff. So basically, putting stuff into the body of the email will just allow them to read it without having to download anything. Nothing is going through, you know, their corporate servers that might get flagged. One way that we get around the attachment issue, because obviously, you know, there might be a 15-page report that we do want to include as a supplemental to our message. We utilize Scribd quite a bit, which is an online document database website where you can just scan or download files to it and then just copy that link right into your press release. We like to avoid attachments just because you never know with the varying servers and email services that news outlets are using. You never know how you might get flagged, and attachments can sometimes just gunk up that process.
This is a question that I have, not that I have any experience with this, but so you do a press event, and reporters don't show up at it, whether it's a telephone presser or an actual live press event. What do you do then?
So let me just say, you know, despite being professionals that do this stuff every day and invest a lot of time and resources into these earned media press conferences, we have had situations like this. This does happen. Perfect example, we did this big tour, a press tour, just prior to the election last year, where we had a semi-truck outfitted with a banner. We called it the Michigan Big Rig Tour, because Michigan Republicans were rigging the economy in favor of their corporate donors and against working families. And we just were like, this is awesome, right? Strong visual for the TV cameras and the photographers, great localized people that are talking about a variety of issues. We had, you know, some big name validators. We had your local students. And 3 days of this tour, of this 5-day tour, afterwards we canceled the rest of the tour because people weren't showing up. And that just happens sometimes. I mean, the best laid plans sometimes just cannot not pan out for you. But we have another tool in our toolbox thanks to social media. And that is, we can be our own media. If you have, you know, Progress Michigan, we've got a pretty robust social media following, 20,000 people on Facebook, you know, tens of thousands more on Twitter. And so we can create our own media even if no media shows up. And actually, you should probably do this even if media does show up. You should be live tweeting your press conference or doing a Facebook Live video, because that way we can still get our information out through our own channels. And then also, if you do make enough social media ruckus about it, there's a chance that it could be picked up by some outlets that might not have shown up. So go as if media were there, have your speakers run through their talking points, show your visuals, and just do your own media around it. So Facebook Live is your friend here. Same thing with Twitter. We can create our own media, and additionally, we can supplement any additional media coverage that we do get.
Yeah. And I'll just add, if especially, you know, we're going to get into being a bulldog on your issue. if you've got an issue that is vitally important to the political conversation in your community and your state, and you never hold a press event where the press doesn't show up, you're not doing enough press events. I mean, the people that get skunked are also the people that get, you know, at the same tour, one of the stops had 10 cameras, and every print, you know, everybody in town that does print.
Oh, that's right.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so you forget when you get skunked. And so it worked in what works in one town might not work in another town. And so the lesson that we learned there was it wasn't just a bad idea. It was that maybe we held too many of the same event. But definitely, if you do a press event and no press shows up, it did happen. Put it on social media, but don't get discouraged,
right.
Because this is about your issues. It's getting out there, and there's all kinds of different ways besides the traditional media to get your story out there.
And additionally, you know, a press conference doesn't replace action. Again, as part of our message, you know, we want to attract and keep people's attention, but then there's also a desired action that we want to lead people to, and that's something that's important. While press might not show up to our press event, our issues and our campaigns and our actions don't end at that press conference. If all you have is a one-off press conference as your strategy for advocating for your issue or trying to fight for change, then you need to rethink your strategy. So because a press conference isn't going to replace canvassing at the doors or going to coffee hours with lawmakers or letter writing or phone banking campaigns, you know, there's still action that can be taken around our issues, and a press event is just one tool in our toolbox. And you know, sometimes you hit your thumb with the hammer, but you got to keep building. So it's just important to learn from things, you know, learn from you know, any mistakes or any things that didn't roll out quite like you wanted to, and just to move on. Did we have any more questions, Dave?
Carol just asked again the tool you use called Scribd. Is it SCRIB?
SCRIBD. Yep. SCRIBD.com. Yep. It's free. It's free to a certain level. It's kind of like Dropbox. I think it's got, like, you know, a free use thing, but you know, if you go and try to download the entire Library of Congress to it, you might end up with some, you know, having to pay for something. But did we have any more questions, Dave? I just wanted to get one more.
Yeah, let's move through and
okay.
Great.
We have two more pauses for questions as well as we continue.
Yeah, I just wanted to get and you know, so obviously with a press conference, you're going to be speaking to the press, and so I just wanted to go over my 3 tips that I give people for when talking to the media. Number 1 is keep your answers short and concise, and I say that because you might sit there and talk on camera with a reporter for 4 minutes, but guess what? The average soundbite is 17 seconds. So it's important to break out your statements into short, concise statements, because then you create a good soundbite that they can use, but then also you have more control over your message. If a reporter asks me a question and I give a 1 to 2 sentence answer, I know exactly what they can print or what they can broadcast or what they can air. Whereas if I ramble on for 4 or 5 minutes answering this one question, I have no idea what they could pull out of that statement to use as my answer. So it's always important to use short, concise statements. And when that little voice in the back of your mind says, oh, hey, say that other thing, stop. Because 90% of the interviews I've done, guess what? The last question is, anything else you'd like to add? So that gives you a chance to go back and hit on some of those things. But it's always important to keep your answers short and concise. That gives you more control over your voice, and it makes for a better soundbite for TV and print. And then, so number 1, keep your answers short and concise. 2, feel free to say, I don't know. Don't be an expert where you're not. The last thing you want to do is start talking out, you know, talking out your butt and you are, you're saying half-truths or you're starting to fudge some things, and then next thing you're going down a rabbit hole straight into lying. So feel free to say, I don't know, and then talk about the things that you do know. You might not be able to sit there and actually talk about this study or this report that just came out that the reporter referenced, but you can talk about how the policy personally affects you. So always feel free to say, I don't know, or follow up with it. I don't know that right now, but I will get you that answer, and then follow up with them. And then the third thing, like I said before, whether you are, a ventriloquist or sword swallower, it all takes practice. So you're going to want to practice talking too. Practice fielding questions. I'll go into Hugh's office sometimes before an interview and I'll say, Hugh, throw me some questions, because just talking, right? You want to get your mouth muscles moving. You want to practice fielding tough questions. You want to practice pivoting away from questions that you don't know the answer to the things that you do know about. So you're going to want to practice this stuff. So that's kind of my 1, 2, 3 tips for being a good spokesperson. Keep your answers short and concise. Feel free to say, I don't know, and practice. And with that, we'll move into building relationships with the press.
Thanks, Sam. So building relationships with the press is a lot less media work, and it's really just organizing. And so let's go through some basic tips on media relations. The media is not your friend. The media is also not your enemy. The media is a tool to help spread your message. We have in Lansing, we have friendly reporters. We have reporters that are very antagonistic. But depending on what story we're telling, what kind of deliverables we have, sometimes especially in the age of social media, it's fine if the antagonistic media writes a bad story about you, if you take that onto your own social media and put your spin on it and get your community talking about your issue. And sometimes you can actually get more people to engage on an article that's negative, that has a negative slant on your social media.
Thinking about the media as a tool, kind of like I said before with the hammer metaphor, right? Think of the media as a tool in that, yes, you can smash your thumb with it, you can smash holes in the wall with it, but you can also use it to help build a house. It's just about knowing how to use that tool responsibly and using it for the purposes to benefit your agenda. So that's pretty important to remember that, it's about that balance. Don't think of the media as opposition. At the same time, they aren't your supporters. They're a tool in your toolbox to help win your issue in your campaign.
And we're going to go into knowing the media. And I want to pause for just a moment and point out that there really technically, and I'm using air quotes when I say this, there's no such thing as, quote, the media. There isn't one way that media outlets operate. There, obviously, as we know, there isn't, there's not one ideological bent to it, right? At the same time that you'll have Rachel Maddow on television, you've got whoever's at Fox News, I don't watch it, telling completely different stories. You have certain media that is reporter-driven, and they're looking for evidence-based, sourced stories, while at the same time you've got people that are just opinion members of the media. And so why media relations are important is you have to know the media that you're dealing with. What is their function? How are they going to operate? And so in Michigan, we have about 10 reporters that cover the Capitol, and with consolidation, there's maybe 15 to 20 that cover politics in general. And we try to know the angle that each reporter usually takes. Are they conservative? Are they liberal? Are they down the middle? Will they run your quotes verbatim if they're in a press release? And knowing where each reporter is helps us when we get on our own a really good story that we want to put out. And so a perfect example is the Flint water crisis. That was broken wide open by a reporter working for the ACLU in Michigan, which is another interesting point on the media. Is we are the only state, I believe, where our state ACLU has a full-time reporter who actually does real reporting work and sources stuff. So after he helped break the story open with the help then of a couple other reporters, we were able to get our hands through the Freedom of Information Act on some really good stories. One of them was the fact that the governor's office knew about people dying from Legionnaires a year before they told the media, and they told the media that they had just found out. That was a story that we could have put out on our own, but it was a really big story, and we're media professionals, but we're not a media outlet, and would be impossible for us to pick up the phone and call the governor's office or to call other people and get the full story. So we actually approached our Capitol Press Corps reporter for the Associated Press and gave him the documents. And we did that because A, we have a relationship where we trust that he wasn't just going to take our document and hand it to the governor's office and say, heads up, somebody knows this. And it was also good for him that he developed that relationship with us because the Associated Press was working that same story from a different angle, and the piece we were missing was the piece they had. It was like this puzzle that came together. And so instead of us putting out a press release that said, hey, look, we have this one email, the Associated Press was able to run a story that said a series of emails, including an email obtained by Progress Michigan, showed. And so that relationship actually what really worked out well for us, because instead of a press release that we would have had to have done a lot of work immediately after to get the story to catch and go wide. We woke up one morning and the Associated Press, it was the #1 story on the Associated Press's national wire. And so building that relationship with the media and knowing when to give the media an exclusive was key. And so for that, it was, we know every reporter in the state of Michigan that covers politics, how they operate and how big their network is. And we pretty much have a good idea of what they think will be a good story or not. So the other side of that is we had a reporter that we thought would be really good for a story. We, through a tip from Harvard, we got a call from a student that went to Harvard and said, I think your lieutenant governor goes to school with me. Unbeknownst to the Capitol Press Corps, to Michigan taxpayers, the lieutenant governor of the state of Michigan was on state time going to Harvard part-time, getting a degree. And so we had this really great story. We called the reporter, and instead of reporting how horrible it was that the lieutenant governor had missed a third of session days because they run the Senate in the state of Michigan and was taking taxpayer time to go to school, she ran it as a fluff piece for him. So that's kind of knowing your media is going to tell you when to leak a story.
So now this is kind of the last slide we have on this, and to get to the question that was posed earlier about how to build press relations. Here's the secret: reporters are people too. They are, they enjoy beer and coffee just like anybody else does. So really, when starting to build a relationship with the press, really just kind of reaching out and offering to meet up just for casual conversation, to talk about your issue or what you're working on can go a long way. Because ultimately, reporters want sources too. They want to have, their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the community. And if you can if you can benefit from the relationship that with them by utilizing their outlet to get your message out there, they just as much want to utilize you to get your information that you have about issues, campaigns, or the community, so then they can write good stories and get those clicks and help pay for their salaries. So if you're just starting out on a campaign, like I said, it starts with picking up the phone and making a phone call and calling a place. If you're working on something like with earned paid sick time, minimum wage, in the environment, whatever it is, call up the reporter and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm Sam Inglot, I'm from Progress, Michigan, and we're working on an earned paid sick time campaign. And I just want to know which reporter at your outlet I should talk to about that. And then go from there. Like I said, offer to, go and have coffee with them to chat about your issue, or buy them a beer after work or something like that. And get to know which reporters cover certain issues. It's becoming more of a rarity that reporters are specialized. It still does happen, but you're just going to want to call and start to build those relations and figure out who covers what. Because, like I said, sometimes you can go and find an email address from a website that says to send the press release here, but there's a good chance nobody checks it. Or the person that checks it covers the city beat and not the statewide beat. So it's just a good idea to get the names, get the phone numbers, and start to build relationships that way. Like Hugh was talking about, a good way to build press relations sometimes is to give reporters an exclusive. If you know that a reporter covers the environmental beat quite a bit and you're working on an issue, you've got some very damning document about a fracking company or something like that, or you're going to be launching a campaign against, to end fracking or something like that. It might not be a bad idea to give the reporter an exclusive before your press conference that next morning, just as kind of a token of goodwill, an olive branch to let them know that you value the relationship. Never lie to the media. It's important for us, one, because if the reporter finds out you were lying, you could become the story, and you don't want to be the story for being caught lying. You want to be, we want to be in stories for doing good work and fighting for our communities. And that also just kills your credibility, because, reporters are beholden to the truth, and if you're a liar, they're not going to want to talk to you, our, present president excluded, unfortunately. But never lie to the member of the media. We want to live our values, and honesty is one of those, because as soon as we start lying to the press, next we're lying to our members, we're lying to ourselves, and then everything just goes to hell from there. So and then also get to know the new reporters. That's a really good way of building a rapport with somebody that's new in town. I always make an effort to call the new reporters or directly go into the office and give them my card and say, hey, welcome to town. My name's Sam. I work at Progress, Michigan. If you need to talk to any environmental groups or labor unions or women's groups, if you need a progressive angle on anything, feel free to call me. I'm here as a resource for you. You want to make the relationship valued, right? So you want to be able to say, tell reporters what you can provide for them, and how you can be of help for them in their job. So if a reporter leaves any place and you see that they're filling it, go and find that new reporter. Or if a reporter is changing beats or getting a promotion, give them a call, congratulate them. It's just like with any other of our relationships or networking that we do. Being Facebook friends with people. I like to talk with reporters, about Michigan State basketball, sometimes after I pitch them a story, because getting to know somebody on the personal level can also help with that professional relationship as well. So any questions? That one was obviously, we don't really have a specific checklist or anything like that for building relationships with the press. Like I said, it's about understanding the relationship and how the media is a tool. They're not your friend, they're not your enemy, and just always being honest and open about what it is that you're looking for, and then looking for those opportunities to extend an olive branch or do a favor or give an exclusive to help build that relationship. So any questions?
If people have any questions, just as before, if you have audio capability on your end, just raise your hand and we'll unmute you, or type questions in the question bar and we'll get through it. And I think you got back about how to cultivate that relationship with the press with a long-term lens will help support pitching the next story going forward. And I actually addressed a couple questions that are here. Eileen's asking again about the 16 points presser. As Sam shared, we'll get a copy of that and then send it out to everyone who has joined this presentation so that people can have it and use it as a guide. Any additional questions that folks have? Eric Everrice's question, how much truth is it to that a reporter has the idea of the story they're going to write before they even talk to you?
Depends on the reporter.
And it depends on the story.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a simple procedural story about, this bill just passed the House and now it's going to the Senate and here's what it does, that's a story that you can have written before anything happens, because obviously a reporter knows what the bill is about, they understand the procedure that it has to go through, and then basically the only thing that they need for their report or their story for that day is what the vote count was and any amendments that might have happened to the bill. So it really depends. I mean, and reporters tend to let you know, hey, this is something I'm working on, for the next few weeks. Whereas if a reporter calls you and says, hey, I'm on deadline and I've got an hour, can you get me a quote? That it all just depends. I think, and like you said, it depends on the reporter. It depends on the story. Back when I was a reporter, I would be able to write 90% of a story about like I said, something procedural, like a city council resolution or something like that, because I had the agenda beforehand, I had a copy of the resolution, and the only thing I was waiting on was to see what the vote count was before it passed. Whereas I also done stories, I did a story about prostitution in Lansing, and that was one where I didn't really know what I was going to be writing about, other than I knew I wanted to, take a kind of social justice angle from this angle of sex trafficking and the realities of women that are living this life on a day-to-day basis. And that was, I didn't know what I was going to write until I actually got on the streets. I talked to women, I talked to advocates, I talked to law enforcement officials, and then that helped shape my story. But that was obviously much more long form. That was something that took me several months to do. And the story kind of evolved as I got more and more information and I talked to different people. So I would say if it's a quick hit story about something procedural, odds are they probably know what they're going to write, because they just need to tell people what the bill is about, what it does, and then the procedural steps that it went through to get to where they are in the story at that point. So it all just depends. And you can also ask reporters, what kind of angle are you taking on this? That's a very fair question to ask, because some reporters might be tackling a story about a piece of legislation from a very different angle than you might expect. So asking those types of questions doesn't hurt either.
Yep. And two things I'll add to that. One, the more localized your press gets, the less likely they are to be ideological in most cases. Some obviously, I'm sure there are examples of hyper-partisan local reporters, but usually the people going in with a certain slant or a certain angle, really just like anything, the more national you go, obviously Fox News and MSNBC are going to have a different angle, and that just goes into doing the legwork. We pretty much, from our relationships, know how each reporter operates, and so it's really just that organizing. And then just the second piece is I'll add the story that Sam was referencing. He won't say it, but I will. He won the Michigan Press Association Award that year.
I got second place.
Good enough. Anyway.
And then one thing I just want to add real quick, because we're kind of getting a little bit of time crunch here. So one of the sexier parts of dealing with reporters is this concept of going off the record, right? We all start thinking about like all the president's men and like secret meetings and like, dark parking garages and stuff like that, and everything's off the record. Rule of thumb, don't go off the record with reporters. Off the record, what it technically means is what I am telling you, you did not hear from me, it was not connected to me, this is information that you are going to have to go and substantiate through other sources. But you didn't hear it from me, I'm not connected to it, you can't quote me. And I got to tell you, when I was a reporter, there would be times that I'd be talking to an elected official and I'd be asking them questions they didn't like, and then they would say something stupid, and they would get frustrated, and they'd say, this whole conversation was off the record. And guess what? By then it's too late. So off the record is something that needs to be agreed to beforehand, the parameters need to be clearly laid out, and there needs to be an unbridled level of trust between you and that reporter. That's why I say don't go off the record, because sometimes you'll think something is off the record, and then you end up in a national LGBT BuzzFeed story like I did one time. And then you are explaining to your boss why you did an interview with a national reporter without telling him, and then you have to explain to him that you thought it was off the record when it wasn't. And it's on you for not laying out those parameters. So my advice with off the record is just don't do it, because it can ultimately lead to problems. And it can just be a complicated part of the relationship, like I said, unless you have some really unbridled trust with reporters.
So Dave, we have one section left, and we still have time for questions at the end. Do you want to? Would it be good for us to move on to that one?
This has been great. This has been great. So yes, jump in. I want to make sure we cover that last section, and then any outstanding questions.
Sounds good. So the last piece we want to cover is being a bulldog for your issue. And this goes without saying, but we find you are not going to have one press event, have one good story, even have a month of really intense coverage and change the world, so to speak. The example I'll use is again the Flint water crisis. For 2 months, the city of Flint, Michigan was the epicenter of political dialogue in the entire country. I will tell you that even after all of that coverage, there still is not water that the residents of Flint can drink without a filter. And so that's something that is still happening, and the partners on the ground in Flint, the residents in Flint, as well as our organization and other partner organizations are still pushing that issue. And so you have to be a bulldog for your issue. So just a quick example, you don't always have to have an easy connection. Our job as communications professionals is to look for angles. So just a good example of that, a couple of weeks ago in Kalamazoo, Michigan, 1,900 students in one day, which it's not that big of a district, that's a massive amount of students called off sick. So the Advocates for Earned Paid Sick Time wrote an op-ed and pointing out the connection between the lack of earned paid sick time and higher than usual illness rates in schools. It wasn't this one-to-one that said, hey, if we passed this, then there would never come a time when 1,900 kids got sick again. The idea was one of the reasons that could cause schools to close is that parents more and more have to send their children to school sick because the parents can't take time off to care for them. And so that's just one example that we recently did. Sam's going to go over 5 quick points for having a plan to keep your issue going.
Yeah, so what you're going to want to do is, like I said, if your entire strategy around an issue is to have one press conference and then be done, you need to rethink your strategy. So you are going to want to have a plan for before, during, and afterwards. You're going to want to follow up with the media after the event, especially if there are kind of next steps in your issue or more chapters in the story as they come. You're going to want to find those reporters that attended your event and follow up with them about the next steps in your campaign. You're going to want to also collect the press hits and share them on social media and continually share them. It's not one of those things like where I saw the phrase an evergreen tweet. A lot of stories that reporters push out, especially ones that frame our issues in a positive light, are evergreen, as in they're always good to be shared. A good, compelling story about why a policy matters to families or a community can always be shared, as long as that policy is still, either not on the books or on the books, whatever the situation may be, whether it's good or bad. So always take those press hits and use them to your advantage to gain support, to draw attention to your issue, to hold elected officials accountable, and to help sell your issue to funders and supporters. And you can use the media that you get to keep your base informed and fired up. They like to see you in the media, because along with being in the media sometimes comes a certain level of status in the eyes of the public. You seem more legitimate. You have an air of power to you. So you're going to want to use your exposure with the media to help keep folks engaged and help them take action and feel empowered. Then you're going to want to obviously have next steps in your event. It's not simply just a one-off press conference and then you're done. You want to have follow-up actions and a long-term strategy to see your issue through the end. Again, a press conference, a press event does not replace a whole campaign strategy. It can't replace action and just old-school organizing. And then you're going to want to be nimble. You're going to want to be able to, especially in those type of rapid response situations, sometimes a quick press statement, just without a whole lot of context, but you just weighing in on an issue that just happened, with the lead-in Progress for Michigan released the following statement regarding this stupid thing that was said by this lawmaker, and then a quote, and sending that out. That can, be just as effective in a rapid response situation as a long thought out press release with lots of context information and supporting documents. At the same time, if you have a press conference all planned out, you pitch the media and everything like that, and then all of a sudden some big national event happens that is going to steal away time from and attention from you, or the sky opens up and all of a sudden it's golf ball size hail, you should be ready to be able to pivot to either another location or to send out a note to the reporters and make phone calls telling them that you're postponing it, but you'll be in touch for future events.
So I want to just quickly talk about the other side is really good at being a bulldog. If you see on the screen there, Bernie Sanders famously said to Hillary Clinton, "The American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails." The reason the American people were sick and tired of it is because leading up to that moment, and then even after that moment, the right did not let up. They found an issue that they could sell, which was this email server, and tie that back to every issue. National security. Well, if she can't protect an email server, how can she keep you safe? Time and time again, they had an issue. They were a bulldog. But here's the good news. We can be bulldogs too. So Aramark is a international company. They do a lot of service work in the state of Michigan. This is vital to the story. They used to provide food services to Michigan's prisons. They were doing a really poor job of it. It was one of the moves that our current governor did, laying off hundreds of workers who had provided quality food service at one of the lowest prices in the country for years, for decades, and brought this company in. And we found out through the work of press, who did a one-off story about how bad Aramark was. What we were able to do then is work with, we had a couple of whistleblowers that called us, but we used the Freedom of Information Act and basically we asked for every document that Aramark ever emailed. it was something along the lines of 45 to 55,000 pages, and we read them all and pulled out the really bad ones. And then week after week, we would put out a new story, one that we called Rat Cake, which was a prison where rats were eating the cake, and instead of throwing it away,
well, they threw it away.
Well, this is a different one.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of throwing away the cake, they just shaved off the parts where the rats were chewing and put icing over it and served that cake. So that story went out. The next week we put out another story that they had thrown away food, and then when they saw that they weren't done, they pulled it out, rinsed it off, reheated it, and served it. And so we kept a constant drumbeat of stories. But more than just that, we built a narrative around it. Not that Aramark was bad at their job, because that was pretty obvious from the stories we were putting out. But our point was that our governor and his administration were ill-equipped to hold these private corporations accountable when they did this privatized work. And so when it comes to being a bulldog for your issue, basically 3 basic words to remember anytime you're pushing an issue. Your message should be simple, it should be relevant to your audience, and then repeated. Simple, relevant, repeated. And that's how you end up being a bulldog for your issue and making your issue go from a really well run, because you took our advice from the first part, press conference, to a message that resonates across your state or your community, and you actually can move the needle on the using communications to move the issues forward. And so with that, we'll pause one last time for any last questions. And I think we got 3 minutes left in our time, but I'm more than willing to stick around and answer any questions that are outstanding.
Still with us, Dave?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was saying that we had a number of off the record inquiries just prior to you guys jumping into that segment a little while back. Why don't we close with this? We have a number of people who are joining us from red states around the country, or red communities, more conservative areas. Can they get coverage? Can they get press? Can they bring attention to their progressive causes, whether that be an elected official advancing economics and social justice policy through legislation, or grassroots groups pushing an agenda at the local level? Can they get their message out in political environments that are challenging to actually fully realize them in the short term?
A couple of things on that. First, yes, and here's why I know that. So as I mentioned, we're part of the ProgressNow network. We're in 21 states. We're in California. We're here in Michigan, New Hampshire, Virginia, a lot of blue areas. But we also have affiliates in Idaho. We have an affiliate in Utah. And Utah, what they found was when you have these areas that are controlled, almost every lever by conservative, more red, and it's almost red, and there's this one story that comes out, reporters get really bored reporting, guess what, the Republicans won this election, and hey, guess what, their entire legislative agenda goes through. So they found that they could be a counterpoint and a counterweight to that story and really go to the media that were bored with the same old stories. And through the work that they did at Alliance for a Better Utah, 2 of their former attorneys general went to prison over work that they did working with the media. So I would say that, and then I would just also say that even in red areas, here in Michigan, we went from being a blue state for 6 cycles to a red state this time, barely, but nonetheless, issues move people. And here in Michigan, I would argue that an issue that really moved people was the issue of trade. And so keeping things issue-focused, narrative-based is a way to move things. And again, don't get frustrated. Sam?
Yeah. So, a couple things. One, we always want to talk about things from a values perspective. Again, if we're talking about everything from a facts and figures angle, or even just a hyper-partisan angle, sometimes we can lose people, and it's not as appealing to the media to come and cover. But if we're covering things from a values standpoint, and when I say values, I mean the things that unite us as progressives, and then also reach across the aisle and bring other people into the fold as well, that's a much more compelling message and palatable to people. You know, everybody can identify with the values of opportunity for all. Everybody can identify with the values of individual responsibility to one another. And if we're framing things in that way, that can help you drive coverage. Additionally, we have to be good salespeople. We have to come up with creative ways to get media attention. You know, if your issue might not be something, you know, if you're going with a hyper progressive angle on something, and you want to have a press event around it, think of a really strong visual or creative element that might, the news director, producer, whoever might balk at what you're saying, but they know that the visual that you have makes for great TV, and you can help draw on people like that. One of the most successful things, press events that we've ever done was with our partners with the Michigan laborers around the road funding issue. Now, road funding at the time that we did this event was a horse that had been beaten to death so much there wasn't a horse left to beat. But what we had at our disposal, thanks to the folks with the Laborers International Union, was a school bus that had the entire front end smashed in with a fake piece of bridge. And they actually went to, obviously, folks on the call here might not have access to these types of resources, but I just want you to get the concept of what I'm talking about. They went to a Hollywood studio prop maker, and they had them make a piece of a bridge. And I mean, you looked at the thing and you swore that the thing had just fallen onto this bus. I mean, they had like cigarette butts stuck on this fake piece of bridge because it was like as if it had fallen off a piece of a road. Now, everyone and their mother had been talking about road funding, and we weren't necessarily saying anything that was new. But we had this really striking visual that just drew press from everywhere. And we did a 3-day media tour with that, and it was one of the most successful things we've ever done. And again, we weren't saying anything new. We did have good validators. We had good localized examples of bad bridges and potholes and things like that. But then our main draw was this bus with this, where people would drive by and stop and take pictures and say, oh my God, like where did this happen? And while it was something that didn't actually happen, we could say this is what could happen, where in Michigan half of our bridges are structurally deficient. That's why we need to pass a comprehensive road funding package that, forces corporations to pay their fair share, yada, yada, yada. So as good communicators, as good activists, it's always on us to come up with creative ways to sell our issue. And so thinking about things with guerrilla theater and just creative signs and symbols of what it is that we're talking about can go a long way. When Donald Trump came to Flint, we built a wall of water bottles. We had an artist work overnight once we got word that he was coming, and over all of the news outlets, there was this visual of this wall of water bottles, and we were tying two issues together: Donald Trump's backwards policies on immigration and the ongoing Flint water crisis. So again, it's just we have to be able to sell our issue, sell our campaigns, our candidates, and we have to find creative ways to do that.
Great. Well, that brings us to our close here. I want to say thank you to both Hugh and Sam for taking time out of their busy schedule. I happen to know they're drawn in lots of directions, working with progressive organizations and other policy leaders to advance social and economic policy at a state level. We're just, as a movement, we're very fortunate to have two of the best, in my opinion, and I've had the opportunity to work with them closely over the years, and to share this wisdom with everyone who's joining us today. They've made a plug for ProgressNow. With Progress Michigan being part of ProgressNow. check to see if you're one of the states that has an affiliate active in your state, and I would encourage you to reach out to them, find out who's on the ground doing this work. There are a lot of tools and resources to support this this broader work. And we'll conclude by saying Sam will get me the 6-point presser document, and we will get it to everyone who's on the call. I want to just again thank you to both of you, and hope everyone on this call make sure to join us every 2 weeks, where we're engage in policy, communication, and hard skill sessions like this one today.
And
Hugh, Sam, final word?
If anybody does have any follow-up questions, or you're thinking about some of the things that we said, and a question does come to mind, I'll go ahead and give you our email addresses. We're happy to field any questions or help anybody out. Our email addresses are just sam@progressmichigan.org and Hugh, Hugh, @progressmichigan.org. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and check out our website at progressmichigan.org, where we consider ourselves always to be a resource to anyone in the progressive community. We're happy to answer any questions or give you any insight or pointers to anything you might be working on when it comes to progressive communications. You guys have been a great group, great questions, and thanks to Dave for having us on.
And Dave, I'll just add one more time, and I say this to every group and every training I do. It's important to know that getting our messages out is hard work. It's full-time work, but it's vitally important that the people that are affected by the policies and the issues that we're fighting for are considered the experts, and not some person sitting at a conservative think tank in Washington, D.C. And so to reiterate what Sam said, anything that we can do to help anyone on this call make sure that real voices are the voices of real issues, we're glad to do it.
Great. Well said. It's a great way to end the session. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.